This video is made possible by my supporters. For more like it every month, check out the link below. Was 2022 a success or a failure for Star Citizen? That's going to depend on who you ask, but there's no denying that a lot happened. I was personally let down in some ways and impressed in others. Looking at 2022 from the perspective of features and tech advancements, it's easy to see the clear successes in the past year. Increasing server sizes, NPCs operating on planet surfaces, more unique new areas than we've seen in the past half-decade, increased frame rates, and the ability to refuel other ships are all incredibly important for the game, but they may not have actually changed the gameplay that you experience all that much. And looking at the actual patch list, there was technically only one significant update listed for the whole year. So commenting on the actual effectiveness or even the optics of this year takes a lot more time, and I've used the last 3 podcast episodes I've had to sum up those thoughts along with some other creators here on YouTube. I'll leave those linked for you down below. Instead, in this video, I'm going to walk you through the crazy wild ride that was 2022. In this video, we'll look at what happened in the community and then in the game's development for every month, looking at some of the drama, the successes, and the failures throughout the year. I may miss a few things, but if you like this and you want to see it again next year, please let me know down below. I think this could be a fun annual video. And if you like these more in-depth videos, I make them every month for my supporters exclusive here on the YouTube channel. That'll be linked down below as well. Now let's do a little review of this year in Star Citizen. The year opened up with some drama about the Ares Ion. It had recently been released and subsequently nerfed in maybe not the best way, which some felt disagreed with the messaging around the ship, and that stuck with the community for a while. In a big way. Keep an eye out for this trend of communication and misunderstandings regarding the community and CIG throughout the year. We the community had also just gotten done with the first rendition of Jumptown 2.0. CIG's official spiritual successor to the Emergent Player event from 2018 that occurred due to lucrative drug runs. The event was good but had some clear improvements that needed to be made. More on that later. Of course, as is customary with January, the Daymar Rally also ran its 4th year with dozens of racers taking part. Now on the development side of things, we were introduced to derelict outposts in the form of concept art. The concept art was annoying, but the idea was surprising and pretty interesting. Something we hope to see more of at least sometime in the year. We of course also had looks at Pyro, as we were meant to be on the road to Pyro with many teasers of the new system coming throughout the year as well. And the upcoming ships were showcased. Scorpius, Corsair, Vulture, Banu Merchantman. We would be seeing more of these at different stages throughout the year ahead. In February, the activity started to pick up. The first free fly of the year was upon us with the Coromore event, an in-game Valentine's Day-like holiday. The Hover Quad was announced after showing up on the PTU the previous month and was released to live servers with much better handling for hover vehicles in tow. We also saw a huge update to the roadmap, which created a lot of backlash, though considering CIG's inability to predict feature implementations very clearly more than 2 quarters out, I think most of the frustration came from the way the message was presented, not the message itself. This key part of the unfolding discourse was of course lost in all of the outside reporting on the community reaction, which is why they are outside sources. But this change was a really big shift in how they communicate Star Citizen development. It drew more dependence to the progress tracker, which is not dependable, and allowed them to avoid so many public feature delays. On the development side of things, we got the first look at the AI nav mesh. As mentioned before, hover vehicles became good, wet eyeballs. There was some Banu Merchantman hype, more ruins concept art, reputation for professions we're still waiting for, and a ton of ship news. Also, there was a first look at refueling gameplay. Not important at the time or even now, but a solid feature that will become career path and a lifeline for many. With March, Alpha 3.17 started to go into testing. the only 3.x update of the whole year to go live. We saw a delay in the Scorpius release and the announcement of the Misk Expanse fuel refinery concept. The Stella Fortuna event took place, with celebration and sales reflecting the in-fiction celebration parallel to St. Patrick's Day. And the Atmo Esports Fighter Flight Tournament took place, one of the more organized combat events throughout the year, and a great chance to see how combat works in-game. On the development side of things, tweaks to medical and inventory systems were made to improve their functionality after their 3.15 implementation. Many Pyro updates were still being included on ISC at that point in the year, and the Pico Balls were introduced to the universe, still not all to be collected, I believe. We got our first look at salvage gameplay, something we've been waiting years to see, and we got to learn about how derelicts were being designed for procedural generation through a showcase of the new upcoming Reclaimer derelict settlement. In April, the 3.17 patch slowly transitioned from PTU to live servers, and the new drought began. This is in reference to the last time key technology held back a game patch for more than 2 quarters, that is 3.0 in 2017, the Great Drought. At the time, we were waiting for planetary tech to come into the game and had to wait a full year with basically zero development on the live server side. Anyways, past all the drama, the Ares Ion got a buff, bringing it back into the spotlight and more drama about nerfs and buffs to ships at specific times. Huh. Okay, well, Firesprite, the studio that was helping to make Theaters of War, was bought by Sony the previous year, and therefore was now leaving Theaters of War behind. It was a busy news cycle that month. Now, a few employees from Firesprite did move over to CIG and have been helping to improve Arena Commander ever since, so, that's good. On to more news. Jeremiah Lee and Jared Huckabee wasted an hour of our time on YouTube over on the Star Citizen YouTube channel. Big shout out to them.
That is the purpose of this entire stream.
Yeah.
Is to finally put a nail in the, is what Jeremiah does hard. The answer is no.
The Hull A was released into the game, though it didn't benefit from the main selling point of the ship, which was the quick loading cargo. That is something we can now see in 3.18 though. The 3.17 patch also brought a slew of other improvements to the game, like advancements in Gen 12 rendering, derelict outposts, mining gadgets, refueling, and a host of bug fixes. Oh, and new bugs. On the design side, along with other developments in industrial gameplay throughout the year, in April we saw a large drop of information on the design of refining gameplay. While this was good on setting expectations on how the career path would shape up, we still don't have any indication on when it might be coming to the game. Also of note, with the ongoing Gen 12 transition, many players reported performance improvements with 3.17, apparently from some knock-on effects enabled by Gen 12 development, so frame rates did see some improvements in that update. On Inside Star Citizen that month, we got more look into Pyro locations, with some looks at space locations that still aren't in the game but aim to improve space exploration when the new system comes. And we finally got a surprise in the form of those derelict outposts from January, now in white box form in Engine. The locations team seemed to be moving faster. In May, the big focus was Invictus Week, a huge event honoring the military with in-space parades, tours of capital-class destroyers, free fly events, special sales, new ships, and generally quite a bit of instability. But this year was better than most. The Scorpius was introduced in the game after the initial delay in 3.17. The idea of hacking was reintroduced with the Legionnaire concept. Hacking after several teases and information on design changes has still not really been shown to backers as of yet, but we know it's been in the works for a while and we probably can expect to see something in 2023. May was also the big month for the Letter of the Chairman 2022 to come out. I feel different kinds of ways about this. There was a lot to unpackage from this letter, and it comes off differently with some hindsight. But ultimately, this marked the beginning of the last stretch to server meshing, and while there have been delays, we're passing the hurdles in due time. I do think this was the absolute last time I trust hard dates regarding Star Citizen, but I'm glad the information was there so that we could understand some context to a timeline they're thinking. In May, the Dunlode Derby in-game race was also the first real sign that CIG was serious about racing this year. It was a short circuit in Orison that players could fly, and in hindsight, kind of seems like an obvious test for more to come. The highlight of development news for that month was a first look at vehicle salvage gameplay. In June, E3 happened. People started learning about Starfield, and the inevitable and wildly off-base comparisons dominated for a while. Mine included, link down below. A nice joint event kicked off between EVE Online and Star Citizen, featuring LEGO builds of either game's ships. This is a fundraising event to help children's hospitals and healthcare. Update 3.17.2 began testing in Evocati to go to PTU on the 1st of the next month. This was the very notable Audible update instead of 3.18, as persistent entity streaming, the key feature of 3.18, needed much more time in testing, per the letter for the chairman. In June, we were again updated on how derelicts were developing, and given a first look at the newest dynamic event to the game, Siege of Orison. The Merchantman saw a lot of attention this month too. There was a light of excitement buzzing around the ship. It had been in concept for almost 9 years at this point, and those who bought it were excited to finally see it get the attention it deserved throughout 2022. It's also likely to be one of the most impressive in-game spaceships in the industry, so folks are just excited for a lot of different reasons. We also saw some backlash that month to the upcoming UI updates in 3.18, which were shown in ISC. These were of course cleared up as being temporary, generally the way things go with Star Citizen and communication. Additions like these are made incomplete, meant to introduce basic functionality to the game that can be built on later in the alpha stage or in beta stage. What we were seeing was an early UI that would then get updates in the future to include some more useful features. To round out the month, we also saw the same completed Derelict Outpost concepts from January and April actually show up in-engine and ready to be played on Inside Star Citizen, along with the first planetary navigation by AI. It was a big moment for the game because of the navigation, but it was also surprisingly fast on a new location we'd only learned about that year. The fact that it came with mission content as well was something we really hadn't seen from CIG before. July opened up with the return of dynamic events Jumptown 2.0 and Ninetales Lockdown for the first time in 2022, giving players a lot to do but perplexing many as the main money-making events for players to run while being run right before a progress wipe. We'll come back to that. The Anti-Air Centurion was unveiled ready for in-game and changed a lot of the gameplay around Jumptown in addition to the ballista. The Foundation Festival was celebrated as another in-game holiday, along with a free fly event that lasted almost 20 days and gave a ton of new players the chance to try the game out for free. 3.17.2 went live, with a fun controversial wipe. Remember what I mentioned about those money-making events earlier? CIG tried to give player credits based on their 3.17.1 playtime and the live events that they had just run, in order to offset the progress wipe that was about to wipe out all of their wallets. But things went poorly. Some players ended up very rich, some players didn't get anything, CIG had to take the money back, and many in the community were perturbed. Ultimately, it ended up quieting down in the long term, but it was kind of a kerfuffle going into 3.17.2 for the long haul. The update itself brought AI on planets, new space missions, item selling, increased server capacity, derelict outposts, and more. It wasn't a huge update, and while it could have been a 3.18 on its own, that name had been reserved for the persistent entity streaming patch, so 3.17.2 was technically our mid-year patch. On the development side of things that month, we got to hear more about how rivers were developing from the basic generation tool to the planetary water feature creator we're now seeing in-game in 3.18. Moving on to August, this was the month things started to get a bit awkward about what was going on with Alpha 3.18. As CIG was struggling to clearly communicate what we should be expecting regarding the update. We'll hear more about that later though. In August, CIG also began hosting official contests and events using TikTok, and made an announcement stating so, which got the expected backlash. The 2022 Ship Showdown began round 1 in August, collecting player creations that honored their favorite ships in order to drum up hype for them in the following round when players would vote for what they thought was best. The winners would then get different skins. Turning our attention towards development for the month, in August, CIG proved this month that they were here for the racing community. Not only did they make official a player-made race course, adding an entirely new location to define the path, they also showed off early looks at PTV racing they were looking to include for some in-game casual fun in 3.18. Something akin to Mario Kart with red shells and everything, except there's not actually going to be red shells. We also saw the first major UI tech update showcase in a while, with 3D cards being put on display using the building block system to make diegetic in-game holo displays. It's very cool stuff, but we haven't heard much about it since. I imagine this is mainly being adapted to Squadron 42 right now, considering the assets on the screen, and we'll likely not see anything using this tech until maybe late 2023 at the earliest. But I hope I'm wrong. Throughout all this time, CIG has been ongoing a major phase of growth. So in the background of Inside Star Citizen throughout these few months, we're seeing a lot of different backgrounds as they found interesting new places to film while the new studio was being built. I just thought this was fun to see throughout the year, and I'm glad they finally got somewhere that Jared can make feel like a little home again. CIG also acknowledged this month that the new player experience needs some work, something we've actually been seeing repeated in monthly reports since, and in different feature developments, but since this conversation, nothing all that tangible. Just make sure to keep an eye on that new interaction system. September opened with a lot of information about persistent entity streaming, and an update on 3.18 expectations, finally. It was still expected to go live by November at that point, but expectations for persistent entity streaming were beginning to be reeled in a bit. We began to understand the matchmaking service would not make PES immediately the thing we had hoped, and it may have been lightly implied that this update drought may continue longer than anticipated. Pirate Week also occurred this month with several in-game events and real-life promotions and contests. The Ship Showdown came to a close, accompanied by another free week of game access for anyone to play. The Carrack won the contest this year for the second time, with the MSR coming in second. Honorable mentions are the Pisces and the Scorpius. Keep that Pisces win in mind for later. Besides the heavy focus on persistent entity streaming that month, on the development side we also got a look into Pyro again with more in-game assets. This wouldn't be surprising though, as Pyro was expected to be in closed testing within 6 months of this point. We also for the first time got to see the actual next edition of Derelict Settlements after the Reclaimer, which would be the 600i and the Mercury Star Runner. Absolutely beautiful locations that players would get their hands on in the 3.18 update. October. Basically this month is just dominated by CitizenCon, as it introduced a lot of new topics to the community this year. The Crusader Spirit series was introduced, a Cutlass competitor with slightly larger footprint. It unfortunately was hampered by incorrect stats on the ship page, leading to some confusing expectations being set. The Community Hub was launched. I couldn't log in for a while, but it was launched, and it will likely become a very useful resource for players over the years. Many bar citizens took place in October. If you don't know about these, they are in-person meet and greets where plenty of players see each other, meet developers, and have some drinks. They happen often, so make sure to check out the Discord linked below if you're interested. At CitizenCon, we saw a lot of great things talked about, even if none of them was quite a gameplay showcase. Because of that, the response to this CitizenCon was a divisive one. Some felt it was spot on, focusing more on current development and the progress of major game systems in the near future, rather than flashy showcases and hype. Obviously, others felt it was a much more boring affair. No matter how you approached it though, there's no denying many things that were shown developed a lot of discussion and excitement. That's not to say we won't be waiting a bit, but I would keep an eye out for those CitizenCon features over the next 12 to 16 months. That would include the new mid-distance travel method, Quantum Boost, engineering gameplay, a new mobiGlass, new platforming, new flight modes, underground locations, new mission types, and more. We also immediately got the STV from this CitizenCon, so there was that. And 3.18 finally got into Evocati testing, which was a hefty struggle for a few weeks, but it was nice to know somebody was testing it. With this development though, 3.18 prospective live release was delayed until the end of 2022, and 3.17.4 was introduced as the final 3.17 patch to drop in November, introducing IAE. The month finished up with a few Halloween contests as well as an in-game and an out-of-game event, one of which spawned a bit more drama surrounding in-game item rewards due to communication surrounding the same rewards a year earlier. There's that communication thing again. November opened with many leaks surrounding IAE, some of which warranted official acknowledgement from CIG for I think the first time. Discussion persisted into the month about the same major changes revealed at CitizenCon, like master modes, and there was a lot of speculation around 3.18 with new information regarding Gen 12 and the cargo refactor coming out. All of these things combined for a very reserved excitement in the community going into November. To add to the fervor, the surprise inclusion of the soft death development was revealed. This is a pretty game-changing feature that allows players to survive ship destruction and defend against ship boarders, while any player that comes by that wreck from then on would be able to explore inside, loot inventories, and steal from the cargo hold. Piracy, of course, came back into weekly discussion because of this, and excitement surrounding it combined with persistent entity streaming and salvage as we entered Intergalactic Aerospace Expo. The IAE is the biggest event of the year for Star Citizen, a celebration of ships and the people who buy them basically, but also a big free flight time for everybody to try out the game and see any ship they want. All around a good time, and fuel for a lot of discussion with usually 3 to 4 ships releasing. This year we had one concept ship, the Galaxy, one surprise straight to flyable, the Cutter, and an expected new and highly anticipated ship, the Corsair. The latter two were met with open arms and excitement. The former, it was mixed, and also started a lot of discussion about concept ships. There was also a medical Pisces variant, a loved ship made even more easy to love. And you remember the ship showdown winners? Well, that new medical Pisces variant ended up not getting the same skin from that event. Most didn't mind this, but the communication surrounding it once again caused some issues and confusion in the community. November was also the month that CIG truly solidified their dedication to the racing community, with the reveal of the first part of the career path being included in 3.18, along with multiple racetracks, leaderboards, and later to be revealed an actual stopwatch for players to track their times in-game. In the background, amongst the amazing sales, the good news, the deluge of new players, and non-stop discussion, 3.18 was still not reaching PTU, and continued to gnaw at everybody. Most were realizing a live release this year seemed extremely unlikely, and we were just hoping for a Wave 1 PTU candidate by the time December came around. Also, remember the Banu Merchantman that everybody, including CIG themselves, was buzzing for all year? Well, due to staffing issues, the ship had to be taken off a pedestal and wait for new devs to train enough to be able to finish the ship off.
We're still kind of actively working on it due to basically people chasing new adventures and just in slight priority changes. We've kind of got a skeleton team that are currently working on the exterior.
We're at a point where we continue down the path and we absorb that amount of time that this ship of that size is going to take, or we, production phrase, put a pin in it and move on to something else, which is going to be a better use of our time. So I can hear all the merchantman owners screaming now.
It's easy to forget CIG is a company made of employees who are all doing their own thing, and sometimes these things can put on full display why following Star Citizen can be a pain. But as of November, later to be confirmed in December, the ship is now on hold until further notice. RIP Merchantman. See you another time. The last month of the year, things were pretty normal and relatively quiet after IAE ended, except for the universal anxious buzz about 3.18. Luminalia began mid-month, absolutely blowing the previous year out of the water in terms of gifts received by players. It continues to be a particularly nice thing for the community to take part in. Otherwise, with CIG turning down for the year, all in-game activities finished up, and all hands on deck for 3.18, we waited day by day for the patch to go to Wave 1 testing in the PTU. And finally, on December 19th, well past projections, and long into 2022, the PTU was released to Wave 1 and we were publicly shown persistent entity streaming. And it performed terribly. But over the course of the days and the coming weeks, it improved, and players began to see what 3.18 offers, and hype began to build, and people got very excited. I'll be releasing my full overview of that process on the channel, so make sure to keep an eye out for it. But long story short, it's good stuff. And those podcast episodes I talked about at the beginning of this video are also talking about all of those creators' love for 3.18, so check it out. It's still not on the live servers as of today, the end of the year, marking a distinct deadline missed. But the technology is in the hands of the players, and it's proved to be working, which for most I think is just as good. Overall, 2022 could be seen as a success and a failure for Star Citizen, depending on how you look at it. This project will always be judged on weighted scales, and everybody carries a different bias. There's no denying the project fell short of persistent hangars, server meshing, pyro, and several other key features this year. But from planetary navigation to persistent entities, to increased server caps to Gen 12, to location improvements and on, there were some big technological wins this year, more than most in the past. And while that may not have translated into the biggest gameplay changes for you, you'll be feeling the effects of 2022 in a big way in every single update from here on out. There are downsides and upsides to this game, the way it's developed and the way it's played. If you want to get detailed info about these things in a fairly balanced way, I host several types of content depending on what you like. Podcasts, live streams, videos, and for my supporters, longer, more in-depth videos like the one you just watched. I make them exclusively every month for all supporters, and if you'd like to see more like this, you can join down on YouTube below or check me out on Patreon. Those supporters also get all my secret codes for giveaways like my upcoming Corsair giveaway next month. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know down below. This was a good trial run, but I'm thinking about making this a big annual project every December, and I want to know what you think. I hope you learned something new in this one, and consider subscribing, so I'll catch you in the next.